Welcome back to TAO Talk, where we dive into the weekly ebbs and flows of Bittensor. DeFi is coming to Bittensor. BitMind is stopping the spread of wartime misinformation. Two of the top-ranked subnets joined forces to build cutting-edge AI and so much more. I'm your host, 563, and we got a stacked lineup today. We got Brody back on the show, as well as Seth from Unsupervised Capital. And for the first time, we're psyched to have Sam from Sturdy and TAOFi. Gentlemen, welcome to TAO Talk.
What's up, guys? How are you all?
What's up? Good to see you again, Brody. See you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I missed you guys in Paris. Missed all you guys in Paris.
How was it, Brody?
It was awesome. I feel like there's a lot of right-wing propaganda.
You just muted.
There's a lot of right-wing propaganda on Paris in general. And same thing with San Francisco, too. I felt like that the first time I visited SF. So don't fall into the echo chamber of Twitter. Go see places for yourself and assess the situation. Monitor the situation yourself and see what it's actually like, boots on the ground. With that being said, Paris was absolutely fantastic and beautiful. The weather was amazing. I hung out with Parisians, the BitMine guys, so that was cool. They went to a couple of their spots. Thought it was an insanely well curated event. Like the Proof of Talk event organizers just crushed it. It was obviously in the Louvre, and that was beautiful. It's like interesting seeing the, I guess the irony, or I don't know what other way to put it, but when you're in a room and they're talking about futuristic trends, AI, all of these, interesting technical innovations, and they're saying that next to this fantastic, amazing painting and beautiful painting that was, created however many years ago. It's just interesting seeing kind of like the differences between, old art and a room talking about, the future. Really high signal. There's a lot of institutional demand for creating these treasury vehicles, as with across a lot of other altcoins as well. So it's met a lot of guys who are creating those, and just overall had a really great time hearing everyone speak, meeting people. So yeah, it was amazing. The event was amazing. Paris was amazing. It was awesome. Really high signal for the ecosystem too.
Love it, man. How did it compare to Austin? Just curious.
Yeah, I thought so. It was a crypto conference, but it was really a Bittensor conference. And I think next year they're going to try to make it an entire Bittensor conference. That is Proof of Talk. With that being said, I thought Endgame was more highly curated. Like the guests were more involved in Bittensor, broadly speaking. Which Proof of Talk was good because it helped bring in a bunch of people who were kind of Bittensor curious and who were trying to learn about the ecosystem for the first time. Subnets were obviously a huge topic of discussion and educating everyone around subnets and what types of AI use cases are being built using subnets. But Endgame I thought was higher signal for people who were already involved in Bittensor. It was much more Endgame was much more technical. There was a lot less, introductory. What is Bittensor? What are subnets? What is DTAO? And much more in-depth conversations from a technical level, which was probably higher signal for guys like us. And obviously, I'm biased. I love Austin, so I thought it was fantastic to have a conference and an event in my home city here. But yeah, I mean, everybody I think had a great time in Paris. No complaints. Everyone had a great time. I missed the closing ceremony at this really popular club that I heard got really loose because I had to catch a flight in the morning. So I'm honestly blessed that I wasn't out till 5 a.m. doing that. But that being said, everyone had fun and everyone was really appreciative of the beautiful place and the beautiful venue.
Love to hear it, man. No, I'm happy that you're back and getting finally back to yapping.
Back to yapping.
I think we have a nice lineup today, but yeah, we have lots to go through. I know we want to get to DeFi on Bittensor, but I want to go through our headlines first because there's a lot that happened this week. Let me bring that up real quick. So this week's headlines, we had fiat payments go live over on Chutes. The revenue is being auto-staked for Chutes alpha tokens. and they're launching subscription tiers here soon. This will be a big test, I think, for the network. Like, are people are getting this inference for free now? Are they willing to pay these next level subscriptions? And I think, yeah, it's a big moment for Bittensor. So I think
Is this
pretty closely.
is this like, does this mean just on like Chutes' like front end?
I think so.
If you go through them that way, there's this kind of like paywall now, or is this like through their open router?
Pretty sure it's the front end, and I think a lot of folks are actually going to the front end now.
Yeah,
So,
I think I heard John say there was like a surprising amount of traffic coming through there. It was surprising to me.
right. Yeah, and I mean, the inference amounts of tokens per day just up and to the right. So, like I said, we'll see if people are actually willing to pay for this stuff, especially if they get something above and beyond what they're able to get on other services, which I think they probably are. But yeah, I'm pretty psyched for this because, you know, top subnet right now, and if people are willing to pay for it, I mean, it's huge signal for the network.
Yeah, totally agree. One of my, like, I'm almost like trained now. Whenever I see a new open weight model come out, I just go to John's Twitter and I'm like, how quickly between announcement and whenever John puts up the tweet that this is available on Chutes, and it's all, I feel like it's decreasing. It's like monotonically decreasing. He's somehow like getting better each time. It's like minutes and it'll be seconds, I'm sure, pretty soon. Maybe people will eventually reach out to John and Chutes to make sure it's there as soon as they announce it at some point.
Yeah. It's just where you can always count on something being hosted. Love to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam, how do you guys think about this whole idea of revenue generation from a subnet perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been thinking a lot about. It sounds like Chutes has been too. I think one part of this that I find really interesting. So did they say that the fiat is then converted to alpha? Did I get that right? Or is it just staying as fiat for services and it doesn't touch?
Yeah, I believe it's auto staked for Chutes alpha token.
Yeah, so this is something I talked a little bit about in Austin, actually, about sort of how do you create a seamless flow that does this in like a decentralized, automated way. I'm not sure. I'd be really curious, actually, to talk to the team there about how they've done this. I think there's a very simple way where you just take the funds, convert it, buy it yourself. But in the future, what I would like to see and what will be soon possible with what we're building is just doing that automatically. So having a widget on your website where users pay in fiat, and on the back end it gets staked without you having to do anything as the company. It's sort of all triggered by the user's transaction. So yeah, that's something that we're building towards that I think will be more important in the future as other subnets are generating revenue like Chutes.
That's super interesting. I wonder how that works in practice. Right. It has to. Well, I guess you could use your bridge. And there just has to be some pool that you swap that stable coin for that alpha token somehow.
How do you go from the fiat to the like USDC leg of that for what you guys are building?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of third parties that will do it for you. So Circle, for example, has a service that will let you go from fiat to USDC on one of their canonical chains. From there, the way this will work is you'll bridge the USDC from, let's say, Base or Ethereum to Bittensor EVM, swap the USDC to TAO, and then the TAO gets staked from Bittensor EVM and converted to the token.
Yeah, super cool. I don't know exactly how John's doing it either on Chutes, but I bet this is something he would like to talk to you about too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Gradients already does this. Well, at least they do. They offer a subscription. Well, not subscription, but a service that you can pay for that goes back and buys their token for you. So Rayon is just leading the charge as far as fiat payments go. But I do bet it's not automatic, like how you're saying, Sam. But one step at a time. You have to prove these things are actually profitable first, perhaps. Awesome. But another big news, speaking of gradients, these guys are teaming up with Templar. So you're going to be able to pre-train the base model from scratch over on Templar and then post-train it with gradients. It's really exciting. I mean, you have this full pipeline developing on Bittensor where you're developing models from scratch in a completely decentralized fashion and post-training them to be able to serve end users. I'm guessing they go on Chutes after that once they're ready to be served, but it's it's just really cool to see these top teams playing together. I don't know.
Yeah.
Any of you guys big into the training side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. This is like we've talked to Sam like from Templar about this, and I think probably a bunch of the people that are doing model training on like the need to have like a full end-to-end training stack, so that at the end of the day, like a paper is great. Like if you write a paper and it tells your process and some of the tech breakthroughs that you might have had, and even like some of the benchmarks. But if that's just at the pre-trained, like a not tuned model yet, it's harder to like get that kind of next layer of people excited about it, because it's not tangible, right? You can't like go use that model if you're not a developer, right? So I think it's fantastic to see like these two top teams basically team up and recognize the need for that. And yeah, I think it's like just a good example of where Bittensor's sort of headed and how these subnets can work together in like a very first sort of phase. So yeah, I think it's great.
Do we know what the workflow will be for someone who wants to train a model leveraging these two subnets? Like, for instance, will this be permissionless, where if I want to create a coding model, right, for myself to use, and then say I want to host it locally because it's an 8 billion parameter model, which is probably the top threshold for Templar at this moment, would I be able to do that permissionlessly?
So
and it's okay if you guys don't know. Like,
you probably have to take the base model from Templar and then run it through a Gradients post training to be a coding model. The base model that comes out of Templar is not going to be like super useful to you, but they're doing those runs in an orchestrated type of way. It's not as if you can kick off a training run on your own. Kind of has to be that way.
That makes sense. Yeah, because it's so resource intensive. What I really like about this is that the benchmarks are so well understood and well defined and easy to verify and prove that if they can exceed the benchmarks or even get close to the state of the art, it will be readily apparent, and a lot of people will pay attention and be interested. I mean, there's so many people that are kind of invested and interested in this out just from the AI side that, even if they can get close to the frontier, a lot of people will pay attention.
Yeah, totally agree. And like to your question, Brody, I think like it's feasible to do that, like to kind of create your coding model on like a gradients. It's just more about the data set that you use to create that model and like how you build that data set and the algorithm that you use to train that model against it. So I don't know exactly how you could do that on gradients right now, like how well that would work. But yeah, I'll check that out too, because I think that's an interesting.
I think it worked pretty well. I think they're pretty. It's pretty fluid on how you can set up your data set and how you want it to be trained on gradients. Yeah, exciting, really. And shout out to Rayon for making these nice title cards, because it makes my job easier when we're making these slides. So keep doing that.
I have one more. I have one more question about the last slide, and you guys may not know the answer to this one, but do you know, or are you aware of how the value will flow between both of these subnets, and how a user is to pay for the provisioning of these services? Is there payment, or is it free? Like, I'm curious, who pays who in this situation, or where does the value flow?
And in general, gradients, you pay per every time you want to fine tune a model over on gradients. And then Templar is just way too early to think about revenue, I think. They probably want to get up to much larger models before they think about that, is my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
Yeah, pretty much agree. Templar's the one running the show. Like Sam is the one kicking off the training runs, like in tandem with the miners and everything. But like he's controlling what gets trained over there, whereas Gradients is, anyone can go there and kick off a run and pay for it. So, but just different categories of training, like 5, 6, 3 sets, just early.
We're so early, guys.
So early.
Yeah, but Score is launching a competitive podcast over on their own stuff. It's actually really cool. It's the first episode's live on YouTube. Everyone go check it out, especially if you're interested in computer vision, sports analytics, industry integration for subnets. I think these guys are like some of the best in the ecosystem at that. Just love to see it. And more content is always good. We should be shouting these guys out.
Yeah, podcasts have become a very popular go-to-market strategy for projects in general. You're kind of seeing them pop up a lot. Have a friend who does these podcasts as a service type of thing, and I always think it's a good idea to just distribute your message and the information about your project in whichever way you can. I don't believe in the whole podcasts are diluted stance. I think that that's kind of silly. I think that the more content, the better. I think the more opportunities and ways to distribute your message is a net positive, because you're going to have people who want to go in and listen to stuff. And it doesn't matter if it's one person or if it's 100,000 people. If it's worth the effort, and if it's worth it for even yourself and your team to just sit down and have a conversation, and you just click the record button and you publish it, then it's worth it to start one. It's kind of like what Seth said before we got onto this stream. He was like, "Hey, I just want to learn about what TAOFi is doing and what SN10 are doing. So selfishly, I just want to hop on this and just talk to Sam." And I kind of think about that in regards to all of these streams. Like, I just want to sit down with 563 and talk about Bittensor for the week. And hey, if you listen, that's amazing. And if you don't, that's okay too. I know there's a lot of other stuff to listen to and to ways to spend your time. But generally speaking, yeah, I think it's great that, Score starting a podcast. Hell, I've heard a couple other people in the ecosystem want to start their own stuff, and I think that's great. I think the more exposure and eyeballs on the ecosystem, the better.
Couldn't agree more, guys. Couldn't agree more. And I wanted to shout out BitMine this week, fighting the good fight against wartime misinformation. There was this deep fake going on about some attacks that didn't really happen. Grok even had it wrong, that Grok was telling people this was real, and nope, BitMind identified it first, even before the community notes came out. So, I mean, this is like real world use cases for fighting against deepfakes, especially during times like this, where it's some crazy news almost every hour about the war. So love to see this. So
the funny story about this concept, not about what's going on in the picture shown here, but there's a movie called Mountainhead on HBO. It's a new one. It's a bunch of billionaires in a mountain lodge, and two of them are building AI. One of the founders is building like a deepfake creation model, and then the other one is building a deepfake detection model. And the world is like crumbling around them as they both get richer and richer and richer. And it just shows kind of like the consequences of, this technology and what it can lead to. And it's just kind of a comedy. It's Steve Carell is in it, but you should watch it because it's funny. And they try to plot against each other, and it's just kind of a silly show, but it actually is kind of real when you look at it in today's world, where there is a lot of deepfake creation, and it's very advantageous for adversaries to create deepfakes to, I guess, rally opposing people and kind of shift the perspective on who's the dominant force in this kind of situation, trying to create all this propaganda. And then on the other side of that, there's a lot of value in being able to detect what something is fake, because it's going to be more and more difficult to discern the truth from fraud. And do you really want to trust like a centralized service like Grok to do this? Because that's just another, vector for misinformation and distribution of propaganda. So BitMine is in a really interesting position here to provide a lot of value to the world in detecting this stuff. And I'm really hoping that they can, get around and get into some of these large social applications to start helping mitigate the proliferation of all this deepfake content.
And with just how good like these video models are getting, like,
Exactly.
they came out with one recently. Like, I always think too, just like right now, like there's so much compute that's being thrown at like just LLMs, but eventually like there's a lot more compute that's going to be needed for video and image models too. And these things just keep getting better. So that trend is definitely not going to slow down. It's accelerating. So yeah, it's like, it sucks that it's like these times when BitMine kind of gets like the spotlight because it's a negative event in a way. But it's obviously super important. And then like the other side too is like the prediction markets are also growing super quickly, and the world in a way is going to start trading off of stuff that you see on Twitter like this, because I'm sure you saw Twitter and Polymarket announce like their integration, or what they're working on together. So this stuff is actually very, very important on multiple different levels. So I agree, Brody. I think BitMine's in a really interesting position.
It's just this cat and mouse game.
Yeah, and but the question is, how do you commercialize this technology? I don't know. What's the commercial opportunity?
Maybe you just become the community notes. BitMind becomes it.
Right.
There's like a little button you can press. It's like summon BitMind for all these community notes.
Right.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, I want to get into, we only had one fresh blood, one new subnet this week. It's actually a Metahash over on 73. I think this is the rebrand of Merit, if you guys remember that one. It's basically mining other subnets. And from my understanding, it kind of creates OTC markets for alpha for miners to use. It's kind of interesting. It's like a very Metahash. It's a very meta subnet. And Const had this take. He said, it's miners union, but not commies. So there you go.
I think this is really interesting. Like, Brody and I have talked a lot before, and Brody's so well connected. He knows there's like always a lot of people that like miners, that want to do OTC deals for that exact reason of like not wanting to sell on the market, because that obviously hurts the subnet that you're invested in. As a miner, you are invested in that. So you don't want to hurt the subnet, but you also need to pay your bills or pay your team, whatever it is. So you're kind of stuck. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting service for the miner side, and then the validators kind of have like an interesting position too, where they can set up their own strategies, kind of customize, what their balance sheet basically looks like, what they want to hold, why they want to hold it. So it does kind of lean into that like validator bandwidth model, which I think a lot of people like in the DTAO and Bittensor world. So yeah, I'm really interested in this one to see, you can do like quick calculations to like understand basically the value that miners get across the board on subnets, and you can start to like back into how much OTC they might want to do with that value every day. So yeah, I think it's super interesting and a good needed service too.
Yeah, these whole utility subnets are always interesting because it relies on these internal players finding use in it. But this one's definitely a use case that I see people need, because like you said, you can't dump the alpha token that you're mining and expect that subnet to be profitable in the long term or useful in the long term. So I'm excited to see this one. Good luck, guys. But want to give a good chunk of time for some water cooler talk. That's why we have Sam on the pod today. Sam, you had this tweet that went out that kind of sparked this whole thing where I think it's on like the base Bittensor blockchain itself. They're going to be allowing subnets to switch over from like a Uni V2 pool, which is like an XYK pool, to something more like concentrated liquidity, like V3. Can you just walk people through that aren't familiar with how those different versions of Uniswap work and what that means for these subnets.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, every single pool for subnet tokens is a Uniswap V2 style pool. There's no for that there's only sort of one mode of liquidity provisioning. So you provide kind of both tokens to the pool in equal value, and as more tokens enter one side, the other token becomes more or less valuable. So it's very kind of naive and simplistic way of liquidity provisioning that's not very capital efficient. By contrast with Uniswap V3, it allows liquidity providers to supply tokens to a very specific range. So you can say, I only want to provide TAO to this pool between this price range for alpha tokens. And so when users swap kind of in or out of that range, that is when your liquidity gets utilized. And in practice, what all of that means is V3 allows much greater capital efficiency and for you to concentrate liquidity around a specific area. So yeah, that's kind of what the change looks like at a high level. It has a lot of interesting considerations for subnet owners and for alpha token holders who will now be able to kind of passively buy or sell alpha tokens. So, if you're a miner and rather than like dumping your tokens into the pool, you can provide liquidity into a specific range to sort of express the view that you want to sell tokens at this price or you want to buy the tokens at this price. Whereas today you can't do that, right? You can only buy or sell, and you can't actually directly provision liquidity into the pool. But now users will have that opportunity.
And this is opt-in, right? Like whenever this hits mainnet, it's not like everything switches over to Uni V3. Is it the subnet owner that has to change a flag, or is
yes.
that who controls it? Okay.
Yeah, it's a hyperparameter that the subnet owner can change. Challengingly, once you change to V3, you cannot change back to V2, at least at this time. That's because it's really easy to map the existing protocol V2 position. So right now, all of the liquidity in these V2 pools is held by the protocol. It's easy to kind of convert that to V3, but once you have users coming in and providing liquidity to the V3 pool, it's not easy to map that back to a V2. So right now, it's only if you do the upgrade, it's only in one direction. You can't undo it.
Does all the liquidity move over as soon as you hit the V3 switch?
Yes, everything gets converted.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brody.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
So all the existing liquidity gets popped into V3 and it just gets like set at the current price. Like that's where the depth is all at that point.
So it gets set from like 0 to infinity, effectively. So it's basically the same as V2 from the protocol perspective.
Okay.
So the protocol's liquidity is, I'd say, identical between V2 and V3. What changes is the ability for users to provide liquidity in a concentrated range. I'd say it's like very much a positive addition. There's not really any downside since it's just the protocol is providing the same liquidity. It's just now you have users that can come in and provide liquidity either to kind of passively buy and sell via a limit order like experience or just to earn fees. So swaps will be earning 0.3%, and that will go to liquidity providers.
3%. Okay, so those are pretty profitable pools then from like a fee tier range. That's towards the higher end, I think, of like what typical, or maybe not for like more volatile pairs, like what alpha and TAO will probably be.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable range or a reasonable fee. One downside, though, is that you do not earn staking yields when you provide liquidity. So there is a significant opportunity cost, especially for alpha, because you're losing out on those great yields.
Damn.
Yeah, you just have to hope volumes keep up and pay for that, right?
That'll be interesting to model out.
It's like we need liquid staking for alpha, and then provide the liquidity with the liquid staked alpha tokens. But
liquid staking, man, what is this? 2023? Are we gonna build the eigenlayer of Bittensor?
Well, I mean, we're on Uni V3 right now. We're having to explain concentrated liquidity. So
yeah.
We're a little behind the curve.
Yeah.
That's true. And what's the relationship between these Uniswap V3 pools and the Bittensor EVM?
There isn't a direct one. I mean, it is like the V2 pools in that it is embedded into the native substrate chain. They've actually built out, they haven't just like forked Uni V2 or V3. They've built out all of the logic in a new language. So I think it's a really significant engineering effort from their end, but you will be able to interact with the V3 pools from the EVM. So if you want to add liquidity,
That's
remove
cool.
liquidity, swap, all of that will be possible from the EVM. And I think that will be a really important use case from the EVM because, if you want to do like build more complex contracts on top of the
Yep.
pools, now that will be possible to do, and you can only do that from the EVM.
Yep, really cool. And what's the current state of EVM tooling? I haven't checked in on it in like probably 2 or 3 weeks, and haven't heard of anything being shipped regards to block explorers or contract deployers. Yeah.
It's gotten
Dev
much better.
tool.
TAO
Okay.
stats is pretty robust for explorers. You can verify contracts there. That's what we use for our development. And yeah, there is more tooling now. We've actually deployed some Subgraph. If you guys are familiar, it's basically like indexing for blockchains. And that makes it much easier for doing anything off-chain. If you want to interact with the blockchain, you generally need a subgraph. So we built that. We're in the process of open sourcing it, providing documentation so that other teams can take advantage of that as well.
Are there any like analytics tools to show contract deployments, TVL on Bittensor EVM, like a Dune for Bittensor EVM?
Yeah, not yet. We're working on getting everything onto DeFi Llama, which I
Cool.
think will be good for just checking
Perfect.
out TVL. You can look at TAO stats for transactions over time, and there's some other KPIs they have there. But yeah, I think we're still a little bit behind in terms of the tooling.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm ready to see like a ton of verified contracts come in. I think there's like 75, and
Yeah,
Sam's probably done a lot of those.
yeah.
So we need more of those. But I think I check that every day on TAO stats, their block explorer, to see if anyone's added any new verified contracts. And there's been some stuff maybe the past couple of days, but it's been fairly quiet.
Yeah, Sam, why do you think it's been so slow from EVM deployment standpoint?
Yeah, a few reasons. One is it was only very recent that you could actually stake and unstake alpha tokens from the EVM. So they added what's called a precompile that lets you interact with the EVM chain or with the substrate chain from the EVM chain. One thing they're working on now is a general purpose precompile that will let you do basically anything, any kind of substrate interaction from the EVM. And so this will be really important because in the past we've kind of been waiting on OTF or other teams building directly on the blockchain to create these precompiles. Whereas now, once we have the general purpose one, we can do anything we want with that. So yeah, that's one reason. I think the second reason is tooling hasn't been great, but as I mentioned, that's improved quite a bit and will continue to improve over the coming weeks and months. And then the third reason is there hasn't been that much to do. I mean, without being able to interact with alpha tokens, without the liquidity, without bridges, it's kind of hard for users to interact with. And so we just launched our bridge for Bridge USDC, I think a week and a half ago or so. And yeah, there's a few other things that we'll be announcing in the coming days and weeks that we expect to pick up traction for the EVM significantly.
It's funny that you mentioned precompiles. I know Hyperlquid is going through that right now, and it's kind of a good segue into your tweet here, where you say, I don't think that TAO subnets should all be focused on producing a single digital commodity. Bittensor provides a flexible incentivization framework. More subnets, SN10 included, should take advantage of this. And then you talk about like you could build something like Hyperlquid on Bittensor. Curious how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few parts. One is I don't think that subnets should all be focused on producing commodities, period. So we just talked a bunch about BitMine, which I think is a perfect example. That's not really a commodity, right? That's like a service. And so, commodities are great. I think Bittensor has an advantage there because you have emissions, which subsidize kind of the supply side. And so you can undercut existing competitors. And that's great to some degree, but they're inherently low margin businesses, right? Commodities can never, by definition, trade at incredible multiples. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for products to come and build their products using subnets as a backend. And yeah, BitMine's a perfect example of that. And it's also not clear why they need to build sort of one singular incentive mechanism, why you, as opposed to having kind of multiple embedded incentives within that. I kind of gave the Hyperlquid example. I heard now that some people are trying to do this, and for various reasons, I'm not sure that you actually should build Hyperlquid from a subnet. But for example, the way that you could do this is by having an incentive mechanism that incentivizes like market makers to come and provide a tight spread, that incentivizes traders to come and trade and like tries to incentivize volume. That like also incentivizes people building on top of the product. Like you could just have a singular subnet that has a bunch of different incentives embedded inside it that incentivizes multiple activities, as opposed to having like 10 different subnets that that all do something sort of aligned around the same product. And so yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at, is like, one, you don't really need to build a commodity. You can also build a product or a service. And two, if you're building a product or a service, you may find that there are multiple things that you want to incentivize, and you can do all of that from a single subnet.
How do you actually write that within the incentive mechanism, like the multi-facet incentivization?
Yeah, so we're doing that right now. So it's funny you should ask. There's a few ways to do it. There's not a boilerplate at this point, but I mean, you can sort of think about assigning different weights to different activities, and yeah, sort of balancing that based on how much you want to incentivize a respective activity and how much value it adds to your product or service. You can also try to like sort of set it up so that X% of miners are working on one task and Y% are working on another. If you know, again, that's another way to do it. So yeah, there's no standard way to do that right now, and it's something we're trying to figure out.
And what are the bottlenecks around the 256 UIDs on the miner side when it comes to the incentivization of all these different activities?
Yeah, so that can be an issue depending on what you want to incentivize. If it's something that sort of follows an 80-20 rule, it's probably not a big deal because you just want to go after the larger players anyway, who are, you know, the most valuable users. I think it could definitely be challenging for subnets that have an incentive mechanism where it'd be advantageous to have a ton of miners working on each task. Yeah, so that could end up being a bottleneck, but hasn't been, I don't think, for any subnets to date.
Yeah, it just, like, I'm thinking through it right now, and it's like, okay, if I want to provide liquidity on this Hyperlquid, you know, some kind of like DeFi product, do I also have to like come sign up and like be a miner on the subnet that's incentivizing it? Like, that just seems like added friction. And maybe there's like a clever way to do this through the EVM now, if there's going to be this sort of like God precompile to where you can like really abstract that away, like the signing up as a miner or registering as a miner. But yeah, that seems also like kind of a weird UX feel to it.
Yeah, it definitely is. However, I would say that with what we're building through TAOFi, you'll be able to do that much more easily. It'll sort of just be like providing, you know, a fee in USDC or ETH or SOL, wherever the product lives. That will be converted to the alpha, pay the mining fee, and then you can imagine it gets paid out in whatever you want it to. So I do agree, it is sort of awkward, but as we get more robust rails to trade from assets on other chains to alpha, it won't be nearly as challenging.
Yeah, well, that even sounds like it's fairly well abstracted away. Like, you don't even know you're basically a miner on the subnet at this, from how you just described it. So I think that's positive for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, Sam, you want to give any hints to what's coming next for TAOFi? Get people excited?
Yeah, I mean, the product that I kind of just hinted at, being able to go from assets on Base, Ethereum, or Solana to alpha tokens in a single click. That's kind of the main thing that we're working on, that we're orienting. Really, the whole team is building towards that. Yeah, what I would say is that we are really excited to build the backend for that. We don't want to like monopolize it. We want everyone to integrate that. So that means BitTensor native front ends and screeners and explorers. It also means non-BitTensor products like Telegram bots and screeners for sort of general purpose traders, crypto and otherwise. So that's really our goal here, is to build out a service, a backend that anyone can take advantage of and leverage into their existing products, and that makes it more accessible and simple to buy and sell alpha tokens.
That's interesting. And how, yeah, like we talked about before, how do you integrate that with SN10 then? So you had that dual incentive of yield management, order routing. How does that all play together?
Yeah, we'll have a kind of proper announcement that talks about SN10.
Okay.
We're going to be changing kind of everything about SN10 over the coming weeks, but yeah, the incentive mechanism you mentioned, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Cowswap or how that model works, but it is the way it works is a trader will say, okay, I want to swap ETH to subnet 10, sort of just the intent. And then on the back end, you will have miners or solvers that are coming in and saying, okay, here's the best route to do that, and kind of creating the back end in a decentralized way, rather than us sort of hard coding, saying here's how you have to do it. That there will be these miners that come and do it themselves, and then they end up actually executing the trades and earning some fee. So it's a much more decentralized way of doing very complex flows, which is what we're doing. I mean, ultimately, we'll have a bridge, but we expect a bunch of other companies, are already working on bridges or, will work on them. And so our goal is just let's get users the best prices, the best execution possible, and make sure they have minimal slippage. And so rather than us having to kind of build out this complex optimization, because there's 10 different steps involved in this flow practically, we'll have miners that come in and kind of create the best flows for us.
So just RFQ, but incentivized in some way.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, they don't even really need incentive if they're going to make some spread on that too. It's interesting.
So miners are kind of like these solvers that are routing these orders. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important for something like this where, I mean, you can imagine going from ETH on Ethereum to an alpha token. There's 4 or 5 different swaps within that, and where you do them, in what order, using what bridges. I mean, all of that can make a big difference for the price that the user receives.
Yeah, so these guys are like market makers. Are you talking to like big market makers, like that are the known people in like DeFi world, to come in here to Bittensor and crush people, crush other miners?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're trying to get all of them on board. I think part of it's just proving out the volume. So, we'll launch this. I think there will be some great opportunities initially for retail and people who aren't necessarily sophisticated market makers to come and do well early on. But yeah, I expect as it matures, it will be more professionals that even have their own sort of liquidity, right? Like if you just hold a ton of alpha or a ton of TAO, you don't necessarily need to do the intermediate swaps. You can just kind of OTC it yourself in some ways.
Yeah.
Like you can just beat out the execution. And so that's actually where I see this going long term, is you don't need these bridges and pools if you have other parties that are market making the alpha tokens themselves. But that's much further off, I think, in the future.
That makes sense. I am curious too, though. Like, well, we use the EVM to do like a lot of activity, and then like the native Bittensor chain isn't like super well suited for fast trading, or like it's not DeFi oriented, I guess I should say. And there's a bunch of like MEV problems, I think, already on Bittensor, and I don't really quite know exactly the plan to solve them, but it almost is like, let's add more friction to the trading experience to like solve some of the MEV. Like I think the last thing I saw was like kind of like lock up your position a little bit longer. So I don't know, like these are 2 major forces I see right now, is like a lot of volume maybe coming into alpha tokens, yet the underlying infrastructure probably isn't quite there. So I don't know like how those 2 things will resolve. I feel like you're probably going to be at the intersection of those for the next few years, which is a good position to be in.
Yeah, I think the solver will help a lot with that, since they kind of cut out the liquidity pool and guarantee a certain execution. So I think they'll help there. I think Uni V3 pools will help. It's much harder to prevent MEV on a Uni V2 pool, whereas with the V3, if you have a big amount of concentrated liquidity within a given tick, that will, in some way, it makes it much harder to profitably MEV or sandwich a swap. So that will help. The new pre-compiles as well. So right now, if you want to add or remove stake from the EVM, it's kind of like a market order, whereas they've introduced these limit order pre-compiles that will make it much easier. You can specify a minimum or maximum price that you're receiving. And that way, you as a user have a guarantee that you're not going to get sandwiched above that limit.
Got it. Yeah. I wanted to back up to, I know the EVM well, and I know like the other like smart contract platforms. Is the Bittensor native chain, it doesn't like, does it support any notion of like smart contracts, or like why do we need the EVM? I guess is like the other side of the question. Can we not just like build the DeFi things or the smart contracts on the Bittensor native chain?
No, yeah, you can't deploy smart contracts on the chain. And so when they're building out like the Uni V3 pools, it's like part of the chain. Like they're not deploying new smart contracts. It's embedded in the chain. And so yeah, unfortunately, if you want to build contracts, it has to be on the EVM side. But there is with the pre-compiles, a very natural way to have communication between the two chains that doesn't rely on like a third-party bridge or anything like that. And so, yeah, I think the frontier palette, which is sort of what the technical term for the EVM, it is very much like built as part of the chain. It's a native substrate palette, and it gives you, kind of all the same security guarantees as the L1 substrate. So in some sense, you're still interacting with the chain itself, even though you're doing it from the EVM.
Okay. Do you think the EVM is like the best choice, I guess, for like the smart contract layer? Like, can we like take all the new, like, there's a ton of people that work on the EVM and like upgrading it and making it better. Does Bittensor get to like, receive all those benefits from new upgrades or like new things coming from the EVM, or is it like, should we have a new like SVM or like choose a different execution layer?
Yeah, so right now the EVM block time is the same as the native L1 block time. So it's 12 seconds, meaning you don't get the performance guarantees. And I don't think changing the VM would affect that. You'd probably need something much more sophisticated, sort of like an L2 style security experience where you wrap up a bunch of transactions into one and then post it. But right now the block time is the same. And so you don't really benefit from the performance benefits that you see on other chains.
Okay, that makes sense. Last thing I wanted to ask. So I think to do a lot of the stuff that at least you're wanting, or like you're talking about, we need a lot of TAO to be like on the EVM. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but we basically need a lot of TAO to like be bridged to the EVM. Is that the case? And if so, like, does that impact, like, what all does that impact? What's the impact there?
Yeah, absolutely. So no, right now it's not the case. There's a native way to do it through like OTF. They've released a bridge for that, which is great. It's something we will be working on with SN10 to bring more TAO to the EVM. So we'll be playing an important role there. And I think once it does happen, it will make it much more interesting for DeFi builders to build stuff on the EVM, because you'll have great TVL to work with, and there's a lot of exciting products that I think can be built. But yeah, absolutely need to push the liquidity, and that's something that you can expect some announcements from us about.
Man, you guys are working on everything, huh? Keeping busy over there.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, but it will all kind of come together, and I'm excited to be able to share everything. I think you guys will find it really cool.
Pumped, yeah, man. Well, Sam, Seth, really appreciate you guys joining us today. Where should folks go if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, if you check out the TAOFi Twitter _TAOFi_, I think that's the best spot. And we have a Discord as well if you want to come and ask questions.
Love it. Seth?
Yeah, I'm at Bloomberg_Seth on Twitter. So hit me up there if you want to chat.
Awesome. A bit of housekeeping before we sign off. If you usually watch the show over on YouTube, be aware it's going to have its own dedicated channel going forward. So be sure to subscribe over there so you don't miss any future episodes. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the TAO Times newsletter if you want an even deeper dive into this week's updates. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, fellas. It was fun.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of fun. Thanks, Sam.